The cold rain pelted down on Zara Mill's sunbonnet as she stood motionless at the edge of her property, squinting through the downpour at the empty trail that snaked its way through the Wyoming territory. 3 weeks. That's how long William had been gone. 3 weeks longer than the 2 days he'd promised when he kissed her goodbye and mounted his chestnut gelding bound for Cheyenne. Wyoming territory. 1878. Zara's cotton dress clung to her slender frame, soaked through from the relentless spring rain. The small homestead behind her, a modest cabin with a barn and corral, represented 5 years of hard work. 5 years of marriage to a man who had ridden away with most of their savings and hadn't bothered to return. "This is the last time," she whispered to herself, her words carried away by the wind. "The very last time I stand here waiting like a fool." She was 24 years old, too young to be abandoned, too determined to simply wither away. The small ranch they'd built together was hanging by a thread. The cattle needed tending, the garden was overrun with weeds, and the roof had begun to leak in the back corner of the cabin. Tasks William had promised to complete before his quick trip to town. Lightning flashed across the darkening sky, followed by a rumble of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her feet. It was time to go inside, to face the truth she'd been avoiding for days. William wasn't coming back. As Zara turned to walk back to the cabin, a movement on the horizon caught her eye. A lone rider, hunched against the rain, was making his way slowly along the trail. For a brief moment, hope flared in her chest before reality dampened it. The silhouette was all wrong, too tall, too broad across the shoulders to be William. She remained rooted to the spot, watching as the stranger approached. In these parts, visitors were rare and not always welcome. Her hand moved instinctively to the small pocket of her apron, where she kept a Derringer, a gift from her father when she'd first moved out west. The rider drew closer, and Zara could now make out a dark-haired man atop a magnificent black stallion. Both looked exhausted, the horse's head hanging low despite the firm hand on the reins. The man wore a duster that had seen better days and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. "Evening, madam," the stranger called out, his voice deep and respectful as he reined his horse to a stop a respectable distance from her. "I don't mean to intrude, but my horse and I have been riding through this storm for hours. I was hoping you might have a barn where we could rest a while." Zara studied him carefully. His face was partially obscured by the hat and the rain, but she could see a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, when they met hers, were a startling blue against his sun-weathered skin. "There's room in the barn," she replied cautiously. "You can stable your horse there for the night." Relief washed over his face. "I'm much obliged, madam. Name's Quinn Blackwood." He touched the brim of his hat. "I'll pay for the trouble." "No need," Zara said, already turning toward the barn. "No one should be out in this weather. Not even strangers." Quinn dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. He led his horse, following Zara across the muddy yard to the barn. As they walked, she was acutely aware of his presence behind her, tall and solid, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Inside the barn, the familiar smells of hay and livestock offered a welcome respite from the rain. Zara lit a lantern hanging from a post, illuminating the modest space with a warm glow. There were only 3 stalls, one occupied by her own mare and another by the milk cow. The third stood empty, fresh hay spread across the floor. "You can put your horse here," she said, gesturing to the empty stall. "There's water in the trough and grain in that barrel if he needs it." Quinn nodded gratefully and led his stallion into the stall. With practiced movements, he removed the saddle and bridle, setting them on the rail. He rubbed the horse down with a handful of hay, speaking to it in low, soothing tones. Zara watched him from the corner of her eye as she checked on her own animals. There was something about the way he handled his horse, gentle but confident, that spoke of a good nature. "He's a fine animal," she commented, nodding toward the black stallion. "Shadow's been with me through thick and thin," Quinn replied, patting the horse's neck. "Smarter than most men I've known and twice as loyal." The way he said it, with a hint of bitterness beneath the affection, made Zara wonder what kind of men Quinn Blackwood had known in his life. "I'm Zara Mills," she offered, realizing she hadn't properly introduced herself. "This is my ranch. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Mills." His eyes scanned the barn, noting the empty stall where another horse should have been. "Is your husband about?" The question stung more than it should have. "No," she said simply. "He's not." Something in her tone must have warned Quinn not to press further. He merely nodded and turned his attention back to his horse. The rain drummed against the roof, filling the silence between them. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the barn walls, followed by a crash of thunder that made both horses whinny nervously. "Storm's getting worse," Quinn observed. "I hate to impose further, but might I trouble you for a place to sleep tonight? The barn floor would be fine." Zara hesitated. Having a strange man on her property was risky, but sending him back out into the storm seemed crueler. She'd heard stories of travelers caught in Wyoming thunderstorms, found frozen or struck by lightning. "The barn's drafty," she said finally. "There's a lean-to attached to the cabin where we keep firewood. It's small, but it's dry and out of the wind. You're welcome to bed down there." Relief crossed his face. "Thank you, Mrs. Mills. I won't forget your kindness." As they walked back to the cabin, the rain coming down in sheets now, Zara found herself studying Quinn Blackwood more carefully. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, but there was a wariness in his eyes that spoke of hard experiences. His clothes, while trail-worn, were of good quality, and the revolver holstered at his hip looked well maintained. At the cabin, Zara showed him to the lean-to. It was a simple structure, just large enough for a man to stretch out, with a small window and plenty of firewood stacked along one wall. "It's not much," she apologized. "It's perfect," Quinn assured her. "I've slept under worse conditions many times." "I'll bring you some blankets and something to eat," Zara offered, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd had company or engaged in simple hospitality. Inside the cabin, she moved quickly, stoking the fire in the stone hearth and putting on a pot of coffee. She found a spare blanket and pillow, and packed a plate with cold biscuits, jerky, and a slice of apple pie she'd baked the day before. When she returned to the lean-to, Quinn had removed his duster and hat, hanging them on a nail to dry. Without them, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. "I brought you these," she said, handing him the blanket and food. "And there's coffee brewing if you'd like some." "That's mighty kind of you," he said, taking the items with a genuine smile that transformed his solemn face. "I haven't had homemade pie in longer than I care to remember." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of rain on the roof. "Well," Zara said finally, "good night, Mr. Blackwood. Good night, Mrs. Mills, and thank you again." Back in her cabin, Zara sat by the fire, listening to the storm and thinking about the stranger just outside her door. There was something comforting about knowing another person was nearby, even a stranger. The last few weeks of solitude had worn on her more than she cared to admit. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the small table by the window, watching the rain stream down the glass. The abandoned feeling that had been her constant companion since William rode away seemed less overwhelming tonight. The storm raged through the night, but for the first time in weeks, Zara Mills slept soundly. Knowing she wasn't completely alone on the vast Wyoming prairie, morning broke clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Zara rose with the sun, as was her habit, and set about her morning chores. She'd half expected Quinn Blackwood to be gone by first light, but as she stepped outside, she saw him at the well drawing water. "Good morning," he called, tipping his hat. "Hope you don't mind. Thought I'd water the horses before I set out." "That's kind of you," Zara replied, noticing he'd already stacked more firewood by the lean-to than had been there the night before. "Least I could do," he said with a shrug. "You've been more than hospitable." In the clear morning light, Zara could see Quinn more clearly. He was handsome in a rugged way, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. There was a small scar above his right eyebrow and another along his jaw, telling tales of a life that hadn't always been easy. "I've made breakfast," she found herself saying. "Nothing fancy, just eggs and flapjacks. You're welcome to join me before you go." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by pleasure. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Mills." They ate at her small table, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Quinn complimented her cooking, and they fell into an easy conversation about the weather and the condition of the trails. He was heading west, he told her, maybe all the way to California. "What takes you to California?" Zara asked, pouring more coffee into his cup. Quinn hesitated, his eyes dropping to his plate. "A fresh start, I suppose. Left Texas with some unfinished business behind me." Something in his tone made Zara wonder what kind of business he meant, but she didn't pry. Everyone in the West had a past they didn't talk about, herself included. "And you, Mrs. Mills?" Quinn asked. "How long have you been in Wyoming territory?" 5 years, she replied. "My husband and I came out from Missouri right after we married. William had big dreams of ranching, and land was cheap here." "It's a hard life for a woman alone," Quinn observed, his eyes moving to the window where the vast, empty prairie stretched beyond her small homestead. Zara stiffened. "I manage." Quinn looked like he wanted to say more but thought better of it. Instead, he pushed back from the table and stood. "I should be on my way. Thank you for the meal and the shelter." Zara walked him to the barn, where his stallion greeted him with a soft nickering. As Quinn saddled his horse, she noticed a long rifle in his saddle scabbard, well-oiled and clearly well-used. "Are you expecting trouble on the trail?" she asked, nodding toward the weapon. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Always better to be prepared in these parts." As he mounted up, Quinn paused, looking down at Zara with those striking blue eyes. "Mrs. Mills, I don't mean to overstep, but your corral fence has some loose posts on the north side, and that roof of yours looks like it could use patching." Zara felt a flush of embarrassment. The repairs had been piling up since William left, tasks she couldn't manage alone. "I'm aware," she said stiffly. Quinn seemed to sense her discomfort. "I could stay a day or two," he offered. "Help with the repairs before I move on, in exchange for the hospitality." Zara should have said no. A strange man offering to stay on her property, it wasn't proper, wasn't safe. But the thought of another day alone, struggling with tasks that required a man's strength, was more daunting than the risk of trusting this stranger. "I couldn't ask that of you," she said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "You didn't ask. I offered." Quinn's expression was earnest. "Look, Mrs. Mills, I'm handy with tools and I know my way around a ranch. Let me help, and we'll call it even for the shelter and food." Zara looked up at him, weighing her options. What did she really know about Quinn Blackwood? Nothing except that he was heading west with unfinished business behind him, but something in his straightforward gaze made her inclined to trust him. "One day," she conceded finally. "You can stay one day and help with the fence, then you should be on your way." Quinn's smile was quick and genuine. "One day it is," he agreed, dismounting. "I'll get started on that fence right away." And so began what was supposed to be a single day of Quinn Blackwood's presence on Zara Mills' homestead. But one day stretched into two as Quinn discovered the roof needed more extensive repairs than initially thought. 2 days became 3 as he helped Zara round up stray cattle that had wandered through the broken corral fence. On the evening of the 3rd day, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and purple. Zara had cooked a rabbit stew and they'd eaten their fill, now content to sit in comfortable silence as dusk settled around them. "You've done more than enough," Zara said finally. "You should continue your journey while the weather holds." Quinn nodded slowly, his eyes on the horizon. "I should," he agreed. "But there's still that barn door that needs fixing, and your vegetable garden could use some attention." Zara turned to look at him, surprised by the hint of reluctance in his voice. "Mr. Blackwood, are you looking for reasons to stay?" The directness of her question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment he looked almost boyish in his discomfort. "Maybe I am," he admitted. "It's peaceful here, and you could use the help." His honesty disarmed her. Zara looked away back to the darkening prairie. "I can't pay you," she said. "If that's what you're angling for," Quinn chuckled, a low, warm sound. "I'm not looking for payment, Mrs. Mills, but I would appreciate a place to lay my head and meals for a while longer. Say, until your place is in proper order." Zara knew she should refuse. A woman alone with a man not her husband, it wasn't done, not without inviting scandal and gossip. But the nearest neighbors were miles away, and the truth was, she'd come to appreciate Quinn's quiet company as much as his help around the ranch. "1 week," she said firmly. "You can stay 1 week, and then you really must continue on your way." Quinn's smile was like a ray of sunshine breaking through clouds. 1 week, he agreed, though something in his eyes suggested he might have other ideas. The week passed in a blur of activity. Quinn proved to be as good as his word, skilled with tools and knowledgeable about ranching. He fixed the roof, repaired the corral fence, hung a new barn door, and even helped Zara plant a new section of the vegetable garden. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch or by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Quinn told her stories of his travels across Texas and New Mexico, carefully avoiding any mention of the unfinished business that had sent him westward. Zara shared tales of her childhood in Missouri, of her parents who had died of fever the year before she married William. She found herself looking forward to these evening conversations, to the sound of Quinn's deep voice and his unexpected bursts of laughter. There was an ease between them that she'd never experienced with William, who had always been restless, always planning the next venture, the next improvement, the next trip to town. On the 7th day, as promised, Quinn saddled Shadow and prepared to leave. Zara stood in the yard, watching him check the cinch and secure his bedroll, feeling a heaviness in her chest she hadn't anticipated. "Well, Mrs. Mills," Quinn said, turning to face her, hat in hand, "I believe our arrangement has come to an end." Zara nodded, unable to trust her voice. A week ago, she'd been standing in the rain, abandoned and alone. Now she was watching another man ride away, and somehow it hurt just as much. Quinn seemed to hesitate, his fingers fidgeting with the brim of his hat. "I want to thank you," he said finally, "for your hospitality and your trust. It's meant more than you know." "And I thank you," Zara replied, finding her voice at last, "for all your help. The ranch hasn't looked this good since." She trailed off, Unwilling to mention William's name, Quinn nodded in understanding. He placed his hat on his head and moved to mount his horse, then paused, turning back to her with an intensity in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Zara," he said, the first time he'd used her given name. "I don't want to leave." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Zara's heart thundered in her chest, a mixture of hope and fear washing over her. "You have to," she said softly. "You have business in California and I." She gestured helplessly at the ranch around them. "I have responsibilities here." Quinn took a step toward her, then stopped, respecting the invisible boundary between them. "What if I came back?" he asked. "After I settle my business out west, what if I came back here?" The question was loaded with possibilities, with promises neither of them could articulate. Zara looked into his blue eyes and saw sincerity there, and something else, something warm and tender that made her cheeks flush. "Why would you do that?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Quinn's smile was gentle. "Because in 1 week I've found more peace here than in years of wandering, because—" He took a deep breath. "Because I think there could be something between us, Zara Mills, something worth exploring if you'd be willing." Zara's mind raced. She was still a married woman, at least as far as she knew. William might return any day, though in her heart she was beginning to accept that he wouldn't. And here was Quinn Blackwood, a man she barely knew, offering her a chance at something she'd thought lost forever. "I can't make any promises," she said carefully. "Not while things stand as they do." Quinn nodded, understanding the complexity of her situation. "I'm not asking for promises, just leave the door open, that's all I ask." Zara found herself nodding. "The door will be open, Quinn. If you choose to come back." Relief and joy spread across his face. He mounted Shadow with fluid grace, then looked down at her one last time. "I will come back, Zara Mills. You have my word on that." And then he was riding away, a solitary figure growing smaller against the vast Wyoming landscape. Zara watched until he disappeared over the horizon, a strange mixture of loss and hope swirling within her. That night, alone again in her cabin, Zara lay awake thinking about Quinn Blackwood and his promise to return. She shouldn't believe him. Men made promises they didn't keep, as William had proven. But something about Quinn felt different, solid and trustworthy in a way her husband never had. The days that followed were filled with work, as they always were. Zara tended the garden Quinn had helped her plant, cared for the cattle, and mended clothes by lamplight in the evenings. But now, as she worked, she found herself watching the horizon, wondering how far west Quinn had traveled, wondering if he truly would return. 2 weeks after Quinn's departure, Zara was gathering eggs from the henhouse when she heard the sound of approaching horses, more than one, by the sound of it. Her hand moved instinctively to the pocket where she kept her derringer as she stepped out into the yard. 3 riders were approaching, and with a jolt, she recognized the man in the lead. William, astride a new horse she'd never seen before, flanked by 2 strangers. Her husband had returned, but there was no joy in her heart at the sight of him, only a cold, sinking feeling. William Mills had never been a large man, but he'd lost weight since she'd last seen him. His once handsome face looked haggard, his clothes disheveled despite being of finer quality than what he'd worn when he left. As he drew closer, Zara could see a nervous energy about him, his eyes darting around the property as if looking for something or someone. "Zara," he called, his voice overly cheerful. "Look who's home." She did not move to greet him, standing her ground as the 3 men dismounted. William approached her with arms outstretched, as if expecting an embrace she had no intention of giving. "No welcome for your husband?" he asked, his smile faltering slightly. "You've been gone 6 weeks, William," Zara said coldly. "You said 2 days." William's smile became strained. "Business took longer than expected, darling. But I'm back now and with good news." He gestured to the two men behind him. "This is Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Doyle, business associates from Denver. We're going to be rich, Zara." The men tipped their hats to her, but there was something in their eyes that made Zara uneasy, a calculating look that reminded her of coyotes eyeing a henhouse. "What kind of business?" she asked, not bothering to hide her skepticism. William waved his hand dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry about, just some investments that are about to pay off handsomely." He looked around the ranch, nodding appreciatively. "Place looks good, better than when I left. You've been busy." Zara said nothing about Quinn's help. Something told her it would be unwise to mention another man had been staying on the property. "Your associates can sleep in the barn," she said stiffly. "I'll prepare supper." As she turned to go inside, William caught her arm. Now, darling, is that any way to treat our guests? Surely we can do better than the barn." Zara pulled her arm free. "The barn is all I have to offer. Take it or leave it." She walked into the cabin, aware of the men exchanging glances behind her. Something was wrong. William had never brought business associates home before, and his nervous manner suggested trouble. Whatever scheme he was involved in, Zara wanted no part of it. That evening, after a tense supper where William talked too much and his associates said too little, Zara cleared the table while the men moved to the porch with a bottle of whiskey William had produced from his saddlebag. Through the open window, she could hear fragments of their conversation, something about a shipment, money owed, and a deadline. Later, when William came to bed smelling of whiskey and trail dust, he tried to embrace her. Zara turned away, facing the wall, still angry. William asked, his tone wheedling. "Come now, Zara. I came back, didn't I? And soon we'll have money, real money, not the pittance we make from this God-forsaken ranch." "Where did you go, William?" Zara asked, her back still to him. "What did you do with our savings?" There was a pause before William answered, his voice carefully controlled. "I invested it in our future. Without asking me. It was my money, too, money I earned selling eggs and milk while you dreamed your big dreams." William's hand gripped her shoulder, turning her to face him. In the dim light of the oil lamp, his face looked harder than she remembered, the boyish charm replaced by something calculating. "You're my wife," he said, his voice low. "What's yours is mine. That's the law." Zara met his gaze steadily. "And what's yours is mine. So tell me, husband, what business are you really in with those men?" William's expression darkened. "Nothing that concerns you. Just be a good wife and do as you're told. Jenkins and Doyle will be gone in a few days, and then things can go back to normal." But things didn't go back to normal. William and his associates spent their days in hushed conversations that stopped whenever Zara came near. They made trips to town, returning with supplies that didn't make sense for a ranch: extra ammunition, maps, and once, a set of tools that looked designed for breaking locks. A week after their arrival, Zara was hanging laundry when she overheard Jenkins and Doyle arguing behind the barn. "Mills is getting cold feet," Jenkins was saying. "Says his wife's suspicious." "He'd better not back out now," Doyle growled. "Not when we're this close. The bank in Laramie's got more cash than we'll see in a lifetime." Zara froze, the wet shirt in her hands forgotten. Bank robbery. That's what William had gotten himself involved in. That's where their savings had gone, financing some criminal scheme with these dangerous men. She finished hanging the laundry as if nothing had happened, her mind racing. She needed to get word to the sheriff in town, but how? William or his associates were always around, watching her, and if they discovered, she knew their plans. That night, William came to bed late, drunk again. Zara feigned sleep, her heart pounding as she tried to decide what to do. She could run, try to reach town before they realized she was gone. But the nearest town was 15 miles away, and she'd have to take her horse, which would be noticed immediately. As dawn broke, Zara made her decision. She would confront William, appeal to whatever decency might remain in him. Surely he wouldn't go through with robbing a bank, risking prison or worse. She found him alone on the porch, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the sunrise. His associates were still asleep in the barn. "William," she said, sitting beside him, "I need to talk to you." He glanced at her, his expression guarded. "About what?" "About what you're planning with those men." She saw alarm flash across his face and pressed on. "I heard them talking about a bank in Laramie." William's face paled, then flushed with anger. "You've been spying on us." "I live here," Zara retorted, "and you're planning a crime on my property." William set down his coffee cup with exaggerated care. "Zara, you don't understand. We're in trouble. I'm in trouble. I owe money to some very dangerous people. This job will clear my debts and set us up for life. Or get you killed, or sent to prison." Zara shook her head in disbelief. "How could you, William? We had a life here. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest." William laughed bitterly. "Honest? Breaking our backs for what? Barely enough to keep the roof patched. I want more than that, Zara. I always have." "Then you should have married someone else," she said quietly. "Someone who shares your greed." William's eyes narrowed. "Careful, wife, don't forget your place." "My place?" Zara stood, anger replacing fear. "My place was beside a husband who respected me, who worked alongside me to build something, not beside a thief and a coward." William rose so quickly his chair toppled backward. For a moment, Zara thought he might strike her, but instead he gripped her arms tightly, his face inches from hers. "You will keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "You will play the dutiful wife until this job is done. Then, if you still want to spout your righteous indignation, you can do it on your own. Because I'll be gone, and I won't be coming back." He released her roughly and stormed off toward the barn, presumably to wake his associates and warn them that she knew. Zara rubbed her arms where his fingers had dug in, fighting back tears of anger and betrayal. She had to do something, and quickly. The bank robbery was clearly imminent, and she couldn't let innocent people be hurt because of her husband's greed. But how could she warn the authorities without William or his associates stopping her? As she stood there, torn by indecision, a movement on the horizon caught her eye. A lone rider, approaching from the west. Her heart leaped with recognition even before she could make out the details: the broad shoulders, the black stallion. Quinn Blackwood had returned, just as he'd promised. Zara's first instinct was relief, quickly followed by fear. Quinn was riding into danger, unaware of the 3 desperate men at her ranch. She needed to warn him before he arrived. Without pausing to think, Zara ran to the corral where her mare was grazing. She didn't bother with a saddle, just grabbed a bridle and quickly slipped it over the horse's head. With a practiced movement, she swung herself onto the mare's back and urged her into a gallop, heading toward the approaching rider. She was halfway across the open prairie when she heard shouting behind her. Glancing back, she saw William and Jenkins mounting up, clearly intending to pursue her. Doyle remained at the ranch, rifle in hand. Zara urged her mare faster, her eyes fixed on Quinn, who had clearly spotted her and was quickening his pace to meet her. The distance between them closed rapidly, and soon she could see the confusion and concern on his face. "Zara," he called as they drew near. "What's wrong?" "Quinn, you have to turn back," she gasped, reining her mare to a stop beside him. "It's not safe. William is back with 2 men. They're planning to rob the bank in Laramie, and now they know that I know." Quinn's expression hardened as he looked past her to the 2 riders approaching. "Is that William?" he asked, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Yes, and one of his associates. Zara glanced back nervously. The other one's still at the ranch with a rifle. Quinn, please, you need to go. Get the sheriff from Laramie. But Quinn shook his head, his blue eyes fierce with determination. I'm not leaving you, Zara. Not with them. Before she could argue further, William and Jenkins arrived, their horses breathing hard from the chase. William's face contorted with rage when he saw Quinn. Who the hell is this? He demanded, looking from Quinn to Zara. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by a sneer. Well, well, my wife didn't waste any time finding company while I was gone. William, it's not what you think, Zara began, but Quinn cut her off. Mr. Mills, he said, his voice deceptively calm. Your wife has just informed me that you and your associates are planning to rob the bank in Laramie. I suggest you reconsider that plan. Jenkins cursed, reaching for his gun, but Quinn was faster. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and aimed it steadily at Jenkins' chest. I wouldn't, Quinn warned, his voice hard as steel. I rarely miss. William's face had gone pale. Zara, get back to the ranch, he ordered. This doesn't concern you anymore. It very much concerns her, Quinn countered. This is her home and you've brought danger to it. He glanced at Zara. Mrs. Mills, I think it would be best if you rode to town and fetched the sheriff. William laughed harshly. And tell him what? That her husband and his friends are planning a robbery. She has no proof, and she's just a woman. No one will believe her over us. Zara felt a surge of anger at his dismissal. They'll believe me when I tell them to search your saddlebags for those tools you brought back yesterday. The ones designed for breaking into a bank safe. William's expression confirmed her suspicions. You little careful, Quinn interrupted, his gun unwavering. That's no way to speak to a lady. The tension in the air was palpable. 4 people on horseback in the middle of the Wyoming prairie, a standoff with no clear resolution. Zara's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this dangerous situation. William, she said finally, keeping her voice calm, it's not too late to stop this. Send your associates away, give up this plan. We can still make things work here if that's what you want. For a moment, something flickered in William's eyes, regret perhaps, or recognition of what he was throwing away. Then Jenkins spoke, his voice cold. Don't listen to her, Mills. Remember what Doyle said, we're in this too deep to back out now. William's expression hardened again. Zara, this is your last chance. Come back to the ranch, keep your mouth shut, and when this is over, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Zara straightened her back, looking her husband in the eye. No, William, I won't be part of this, and I won't let you hurt innocent people for your greed. William's face twisted with rage. Then you've made your choice. He turned to Jenkins. Let's go. We need to warn Doyle and move up our timeline. As they turned their horses, William looked back at Quinn with pure hatred. As for you, whatever your name is, if I see you again, I'll kill you. Quinn didn't respond, his gun still trained on the retreating men until they were a safe distance away. Only then did he holster his weapon and turn to Zara, concern etched on his face. Are you all right? Zara nodded, though she felt far from all right. Her hands were shaking and the reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. We need to warn the sheriff, she said. They'll move quickly now. Quinn reached across the space between their horses and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. We will, but first, tell me everything that's happened since I left. As they rode side by side toward Laramie, Zara explained how William had returned with his associates, the fragments of conversation she'd overheard, and her confrontation with William that morning. Quinn listened intently, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. I shouldn't have left you, he said when she finished. I knew something wasn't right about your husband's absence. You couldn't have known he'd return with criminals, Zara replied, and you came back just as you promised. Quinn's eyes softened as they met hers. I would have come back sooner, but I needed to settle that business I mentioned. Needed to be free of it before I could offer you. Well, before I could offer you anything. The implication of his words made Zara's heart flutter, but this wasn't the time to explore such feelings. We need to focus on stopping William and his associates, she said. Before someone gets hurt. Quinn nodded, his expression becoming businesslike again. We'll ride for Laramie. The sheriff there is a good man. I met him on my way west. He'll believe us. They rode hard, pushing their horses as much as they dared. Laramie was still a small frontier town, but it had grown significantly in recent years with the coming of the railroad. Its bank served ranchers and merchants from miles around, making it a tempting target for men like William and his associates. As they approached the town, Quinn suggested they separate. I'll find the sheriff, he said. You go to the hotel and wait. It might be safer if William doesn't see you. Zara shook her head firmly. No, I need to do this. He's my husband, and this is partly my responsibility. Quinn looked like he wanted to argue but respected her decision. Together, they rode down Laramie's main street to the sheriff's office, a small building with a single jail cell visible through the front window. Sheriff Thomas Blackwell was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened carefully as Zara explained the situation, occasionally glancing at Quinn, who stood supportively at her side. Mrs. Mills, the sheriff said when she finished, these are serious accusations against your husband. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard? I am, Zara replied steadily. Sheriff, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure. William and his associates were planning to rob your bank, and now that they know I've discovered their plan, they might act even more rashly. Sheriff Blackwell stroked his mustache thoughtfully, then turned to Quinn. And you, Mr. Blackwood, you're involved in this how exactly? Quinn met the sheriff's evaluating gaze without flinching. I was passing through Mrs. Mills' property some weeks ago. She offered me shelter during a storm, and I stayed on to help with some repairs. I returned today to check on things and found this situation. There was more to it than that, of course, but Quinn kept his explanation simple and free of any hint of impropriety. Zara was grateful for his discretion. The sheriff nodded slowly. I know you by reputation, Blackwood. Heard you were a Texas Ranger before you headed west. This was news to Zara, who glanced at Quinn in surprise. He nodded slightly, confirming the sheriff's statement. I was, Quinn acknowledged. Left the service 6 months ago, but old habits die hard. When I saw a woman in trouble, I couldn't ride away. Sheriff Blackwell seemed to come to a decision. All right, I'll post deputies at the bank, and we'll keep an eye out for your husband and his associates. In the meantime, Mrs. Mills, I suggest you find somewhere safe to stay until this is resolved. She can stay at the hotel, Quinn offered. I'll make sure she's protected. The sheriff raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on the arrangement. Fine, but stay close. I may need you both to identify these men if they show up. As they left the sheriff's office, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She'd done what she could to prevent the robbery, to protect innocent people from William's scheme. Now she had to face the other reality: her marriage was over, regardless of what happened next. A Texas Ranger, she asked Quinn as they walked toward the hotel. You never mentioned that. Quinn looked slightly embarrassed. Former Ranger. It didn't seem relevant at the time. It might have been relevant when you were offering to stay at my ranch, Zara pointed out. It explains a lot about you, though. Does it? Quinn asked, curious. The way you handle yourself, the gun, the way you assess everything around you, always aware. Zara smiled slightly. I thought you were just naturally cautious. 8 years in the Rangers will do that to a man, Quinn admitted. But I left that life behind for a reason. Wanted something quieter. They reached the hotel, a 2-story building with a wide porch and clean windows. Inside, Quinn arranged for a room for Zara, insisting on paying for it himself. The clerk eyed them curiously but asked no questions. "I'll take a room down the hall," Quinn told her as they climbed the stairs. "Close enough if you need anything, but—" He trailed off, aware of the proprieties. Zara appreciated his consideration. Despite the urgency of their situation, he was careful of her reputation. "Thank you, Quinn, for everything." At her door they paused, suddenly awkward with each other. There was so much unsaid between them, so many feelings just beginning to take shape, but now wasn't the time to explore them. "Try to rest," Quinn said gently. "I'll check with the sheriff later, see if there's any news." Zara nodded, then impulsively reached out and squeezed his hand. "Be careful." His fingers closed around hers briefly, warm and strong. "Always am." Alone in her hotel room, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of a few weeks, her life had been completely upended. William's betrayal, Quinn's return, and now this flight to town to prevent a crime. It was almost too much to comprehend. And yet, beneath the turmoil, there was a strange sense of clarity. For years, she'd been living William's dream, supporting his ambitions while suppressing her own desires for stability and honest work. Now, faced with the stark reality of who her husband truly was, Zara felt as if a veil had been lifted. She could see clearly now not just William's flaws, but her own strength. She had built that ranch as much as William had. She had kept it running during his frequent absences. And she had found the courage to stand up to him when it mattered most. Whatever happened next, Zara knew she would survive it. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Cautiously, she approached. "Who is it, Quinn?" came the response. "The sheriff needs us." Zara opened the door to find Quinn looking grave. "What's happened?" "William and his associates were spotted at the edge of town," Quinn explained as they hurried down the stairs. "Sheriff Blackwell wants us to identify them from a distance, make sure they are the right men before he makes a move." The sheriff was waiting outside the hotel, mounted on a sturdy bay gelding. 2 deputies flanked him, both armed with rifles. "Mrs. Mills, Mr. Blackwood," the sheriff greeted them. "My deputy spotted 3 men matching your description scouting the bank about half an hour ago. They've retreated to a lined shack just outside town. I need you to confirm it's them before we move in." Quinn helped Zara mount her mare, then swung up onto Shadow's back. They followed the sheriff and his deputies out of town, staying on the main road for about a mile before veering off onto a small trail that led into a copse of cottonwoods. "The shack's just beyond those trees," Sheriff Blackwell explained in a low voice as they dismounted. "We'll approach on foot from here. Stay behind us and keep quiet." They crept through the trees, Zara's heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Quinn stayed close beside her, his presence reassuring in the tense situation. The lined shack came into view, a small, dilapidated structure that had probably once housed ranch hands during roundup. 3 horses were tethered outside, one of which Zara recognized as William's new mount. Sheriff Blackwell passed Zara his field glasses. "Take a look, Mrs. Mills." "Are those your husband's horses?" Zara peered through the glasses, focusing on the animals first, then on the shack itself. Through a dirty window she could make out 3 figures inside. "Yes," she confirmed. "That's William's horse, and I recognize the men inside. It's them." The sheriff nodded grimly, taking back the glasses. "All right. Here's what we'll do. My deputies and I will approach from 3 sides. Mr. Blackwood, I'd appreciate your assistance in covering the fourth side given your experience. Quinn nodded. Happy to help, Sheriff. Mrs. Mills, you stay here, Sheriff Blackwell continued. If there's gunfire, which I hope to avoid, keep your head down and stay hidden. Zara wanted to protest being left behind but knew it was the sensible course. She wasn't trained for confrontations like this, and her presence might only complicate matters. Be careful, she said, looking at Quinn. All of you. The men moved off, spreading out to surround the shack. Quinn gave Zara's hand a quick squeeze before disappearing into the trees, his revolver drawn and ready. Zara watched from her hiding place as the lawmen stealthily approached the shack. The sheriff positioned himself near the front door, while his deputies covered the sides. Quinn moved to the rear, where a small window and back door provided potential escape routes. Sheriff Blackwell's voice rang out, startlingly loud in the quiet afternoon. William Mills, this is Sheriff Blackwell. You and your associates are surrounded. Come out with your hands up. There was a moment of shocked silence, then a flurry of movement visible through the windows. Zara held her breath, praying there wouldn't be violence. The front door of the shack burst open and Jenkins emerged, a gun in his hand. He fired wildly in the sheriff's direction, the shot going wide. The sheriff's return fire was more accurate, striking Jenkins in the shoulder and sending him sprawling into the dirt. Drop your weapon, the sheriff commanded, advancing cautiously. Jenkins, clutching his bleeding shoulder, let his gun fall from his fingers. One of the deputies moved in quickly to secure him. From inside the shack came the sound of breaking glass. Zara caught a glimpse of movement at the rear window, Doyle attempting to escape. Quinn's voice rang out, ordering him to freeze, but Doyle ignored the command, leveling a shotgun at Quinn. The sound of a gunshot made Zara flinch. For a heart-stopping moment, she feared Quinn had been hit, but then she saw Doyle collapse, Quinn still standing with his smoking revolver. William Mills, the sheriff called again. Your associates are down. Come out now or we'll come in after you. 10 seconds ticked by. Zara strained to see inside the shack, wondering what William was doing, what he was thinking. Was he desperate enough to fight to the death? Finally, the door creaked open wider. William emerged slowly, his hands raised. He looked defeated, his face pale and drawn. His eyes scanned the surroundings until they found Zara in her hiding place. For a long moment, they stared at each other, husband and wife, now irreparably divided. There was no anger in William's gaze now, only a weary resignation. He seemed to nod slightly, as if acknowledging the end of something, before the deputies moved in to handcuff him. The aftermath was a blur of activity. Jenkins and Doyle were treated for their wounds by the town doctor, then locked in the jail alongside William. Sheriff Blackwell took statements from Quinn and Zara, documenting the planned robbery and the confrontation at the line shack. They'll be transferred to Cheyenne for trial, the sheriff explained. Bank robbery's a federal offense, especially with the violence they demonstrated today. They're looking at significant prison time. Zara nodded, the reality of William's fate settling heavily on her. Despite everything, there was a part of her that mourned for the young man she'd married, for the dreams they'd once shared. I'd like to see him, she said, before he's transferred. The sheriff hesitated, glancing at Quinn, who had remained steadfastly by Zara's side throughout the ordeal. Are you sure that's wise, Mrs. Mills? I'm sure, Zara replied firmly. I need to say goodbye. Sheriff Blackwell nodded reluctantly. All right, 5 minutes under my supervision. William sat on the narrow cot in his cell, his head in his hands. He looked up when Zara approached, surprise flickering across his face. Didn't expect to see you again, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I needed to understand, Zara replied, standing a careful distance from the cell bars. Why, William? We had a life together. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. William laughed bitterly. It was never enough, Zara, not for me. I wanted more excitement, wealth, adventure. The ranch was your dream, not mine. You should have told me, Zara said softly. Instead of pretending, instead of leaving me waiting and wondering. Would it have made a difference? William asked, his eyes searching hers. Would you have come with me, lived the life I wanted? Zara considered the question honestly. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have. But at least we could have parted honestly instead of this. William nodded, accepting her answer. For what it's worth, I did love you in my way, just not enough to change who I am. And I loved you, Zara replied, but not enough to ignore who you've become. They looked at each other through the bars, the years they'd shared stretching between them like a bridge now collapsed. What will you do now? William asked. Keep the ranch, Zara said without hesitation. It's my home, always has been. William's eyes flickered past her to where Quinn waited by the door. And him, the gunslinger who helped take me down. Zara refused to be baited. Goodbye, William. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. She turned and walked away, not looking back. Some chapters needed to be closed firmly, with no possibility of reopening. Outside the jail, Quinn waited, his expression concerned. All right, he asked simply. Zara nodded, surprising herself with how true it was. Yes, I think I am. They walked together to the hotel, the setting sun painting Laramie's dusty streets in shades of gold and amber. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. At the hotel entrance, Zara paused, looking up at Quinn. Thank you, she said. For coming back when you did, for helping me through this. Quinn's blue eyes were warm as they met hers. I told you I'd return. You did, Zara acknowledged. I just didn't expect it to be in the middle of such chaos. Quinn smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect, Mrs. Mills. Zara, she corrected him. I think after everything you can call me Zara. His smile deepened. Zara, he repeated as if savoring the sound. Would you join me for dinner? I think we've earned a quiet meal after today's excitement. Zara hesitated only briefly. William was in jail, soon to be transferred for trial. Her marriage was effectively over, though the legal formalities would take time. Was it wrong to share a meal with Quinn under these circumstances? But the warmth in his eyes, the quiet strength he'd shown, and the respect with which he'd treated her throughout their acquaintance decided her. I'd like that, she said. Very much. Over dinner in the hotel's small dining room, they talked not of William or the day's events, but of themselves. Quinn told her more about his years as a Texas Ranger, the good he'd done, and the toll it had taken. The unfinished business that had sent him west, he explained, was delivering evidence against a corrupt former colleague, a duty now completed. And now, Zara asked, what does Quinn Blackwood want from life? Quinn considered the question, his eyes never leaving hers. Something simpler than what I had. Land of my own, perhaps. A place to put down roots. And he hesitated, then continued with quiet sincerity, someone to share it with. Someone who values honesty and hard work as much as I do. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Zara felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. That sounds like a good dream, she said softly. One worth pursuing. Quinn reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Zara, I know your situation is complicated. I know there are legal matters to resolve and you need time. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere, not unless you ask me to. Zara turned her hand under his, their fingers intertwining. I don't want you to go, she admitted. These past weeks have been confusing, painful, but meeting you has been the one bright spot." Quinn's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "Then I'll stay. As your friend, your neighbor, whatever you need me to be, until you're ready for more." They returned to the ranch the next day after confirming with Sheriff Blackwell that William and his associates had been transferred to Cheyenne. The homestead looked just as they'd left it, peaceful in the morning light. As they approached the cabin, Zara felt a strange mixture of emotions. This place held memories of her life with William, some good, many challenging, but it was still her home, her land. And now, with Quinn riding beside her, it felt like the setting for a new beginning rather than the end of a failed marriage. "It needs work," she said, looking at the ranch with fresh eyes. "But it's good land." Quinn nodded, his gaze taking in the property. "Very good land. And you've done well with it, despite everything." They settled into a routine over the following weeks. Quinn stayed in the lean-to as he had before, helping Zara with the ranch work during the day. They repaired fences, tended the garden, and cared for the livestock together. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch or by the fire, talking about their lives, their hopes, their dreams. News came from Cheyenne that William and his associates had been convicted of attempted bank robbery and other charges. William would spend the next 10 years in prison. With the evidence of abandonment and criminal activity, Zara's lawyer assured her that a divorce would be granted without difficulty. "It will take time," the lawyer warned, "but the outcome is certain. You'll be free to rebuild your life, Mrs. Mills." As summer turned to fall and fall began to yield to winter, Zara found herself looking forward to each day in a way she hadn't for years. Quinn's presence brought not just physical help but emotional support, companionship, and increasingly, deeper feelings that she both welcomed and feared. One crisp November evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day of preparing the ranch for winter, Quinn broached the subject they'd both been carefully avoiding. "Zara," he said, his voice gentle, "I've been thinking about building a cabin." She looked at him, confused. "A cabin? Where?" "On the north section of your property," Quinn replied. "That piece you mentioned was good but underutilized. If you're agreeable, I'd like to purchase it from you. Build something there." Zara's heart quickened. "You want to stay permanently?" Quinn met her gaze steadily. "I do. I want to build something here, a life, a future. Preferably with you when you're ready. But even if you're not, I've come to love this land, this place." Zara was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. The idea of Quinn establishing himself nearby, of having him close but respecting her need for time and space, it was exactly what she needed. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said finally, her voice soft with emotion. "The north section would be perfect for you." Quinn's smile was brilliant in the firelight. "Thank you, Zara. I promise to be a good neighbor." "The best neighbor," she agreed, returning his smile, "and perhaps, someday, more than that." The understanding between them deepened that night, a promise of possibilities, of patience, of a future they might build together when the time was right. Winter came to Wyoming territory with its usual ferocity, bitter cold, howling winds, and snow that transformed the landscape into a vast white expanse. Quinn began work on his cabin, hauling logs and supplies whenever the weather permitted. Zara helped when she could, learning new skills as they worked side by side. By Christmas, the cabin's walls were up and the roof was on, though the interior remained unfinished. They celebrated the holiday together in Zara's cabin, exchanging simple gifts: a new hat Zara had knitted for Quinn, a beautifully carved wooden box Quinn had made for Zara. "It's for keepsakes," he explained as she ran her fingers over the smooth wood, admiring the intricate design he'd etched into the lid. "Memories worth preserving." Zara looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. It's beautiful, Quinn, thank you. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Quinn took her hand in his. Zara, he said, his voice low and earnest. I know we agreed to wait, and I'll honor that for as long as necessary, but I want you to know without any doubt that I love you. I have since that rainy night when you offered shelter to a stranger. Zara's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. No one had ever spoken to her with such simple, honest emotion, not even William in their early days together. Quinn, she whispered, squeezing his hand. I love you too. I think I have for a long time, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. His smile was worth every moment of uncertainty, every struggle she'd endured. We have time, he assured her. All the time we need. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it brought more than just melting snow and green grass. It brought news from Cheyenne. Zara's divorce had been granted. She was legally free. The day the papers arrived, Zara stood on her porch, reading the official document with a strange sense of finality. Her marriage to William was over, a chapter closed. She felt not joy or sorrow, but a profound sense of relief. Quinn found her there, his expression concerned as he took in her solemn face. Bad news? He asked gently. Zara shook her head, holding up the papers. No, good news, actually. The divorce is final. Understanding dawned in Quinn's eyes, followed by a carefully contained hope. How do you feel? Free, Zara said honestly. Sad for what might have been, but mostly free to move forward. Quinn nodded, respecting her mixed emotions. Forward is a good direction, he said simply. That evening, as they walked together across the greening prairie, Quinn stopped at the crest of a small hill overlooking both their properties, Zara's established ranch and Quinn's newly built cabin. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, gesturing to the vista before them. All this space, all this possibility. Zara nodded, breathing in the fresh spring air. It is. I've always loved it here, even in the hardest times. Quinn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Zara Mills, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I know we agreed to take things slowly, and I've tried to be patient. But now that you're free, I need to ask, will you marry me? Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. Will you be my wife, my partner in everything? Zara looked into his blue eyes, so full of love and hope, and felt the last of her reservations melt away. This man had shown her what real partnership looked like: respect, support, shared dreams, and honest communication. Yes, she said, her voice strong and clear. Yes, Quinn Blackwood, I will marry you, and I don't want to wait any longer than necessary. Joy spread across Quinn's face like sunrise over the prairie. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up passion and tenderness of months of waiting, months of building something precious between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. I promise you, Zara, I will never leave you waiting in the rain. I will always come home to you. And I will always be here, she promised in return. Not waiting, but building our life, our future together. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Laramie, with only a few friends as witnesses. Sheriff Blackwell gave the bride away, declaring it his privilege to see two good people find happiness after such trials. Their wedding night was spent in Quinn's cabin, now furnished simply but comfortably. As husband and wife, they discovered each other with wonder and tenderness, their love deepening with each touch, each whispered word of devotion. In the years that followed, the Mills Blackwood Ranch, as it came to be known, prospered under their joint care. They expanded their herd, improved the land, and eventually built a new, larger home halfway between the original cabin and Quinn's place. Children came first: a daughter with Quinn's blue eyes and Zara's determined spirit. Then twin boys who grew into tall, strong young men with their father's integrity and their mother's compassion. Sometimes on rainy evenings, Zara would stand on their porch, watching the water fall on the land they'd nurtured together. Quinn would inevitably find her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, remembering. He would ask softly, knowing how her mind sometimes wandered to that pivotal day when she'd stood in the rain, waiting for a husband who never returned, only to find a different man riding toward her. Appreciating, she would correct him, leaning back into his solid strength. How something that seemed like an ending became the most beautiful beginning. And Quinn would turn her in his arms, kissing her with the same devotion he'd shown from the very start. The best kind of beginning, he would agree, the kind that never ends. Together, they had transformed abandonment into abundance, loneliness into love, waiting into building. And on their ranch in the Wyoming Territory, they found something more precious than gold or adventure. They found home in each other's arms.